Hello, and welcome to the Wine Educate podcast, where we explore WSET education, study tips, and practical advice for wine enthusiasts and professionals. I'm your host, Joanne Close, and this is episode 41, How to Navigate a Wine Trade Tasting. So this is one of these themes that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and I just couldn't really fit it in anywhere. And now that we're in this space between finishing the level 3 prep information and another project that's coming up, I was like, I'm going to talk about this because I do think it's really important. Trade tastings are not just for folks that are actively in the wine business. All different types of trade tastings and wine tasting events, all the way from the really large ones that are hundreds of people and there's food and there's all other things going on. I still put those in to the trade tasting category as long as there's actual winemakers and representatives there that are knowledgeable, that are pouring their wines. So we have anything from those really large events that sometimes you have to pay tickets for and it's kind of expensive, all the way to smaller things, maybe more intimate things. I went to a Bordeaux dinner not so long ago. There was about 18 people there. And maybe the more common one I'm referring to are the trade events organized around a theme or a portfolio. And there's anywhere from 10 to 50 winemakers there that are pouring their wines. So I wanted to talk to you all about this because there's definitely a better way to approach these tastings. So let's talk a little bit about who can come to these tastings. So if you're in the wine business, you own a retail shop, you are a buyer for a restaurant, so on and so forth, your sales rep, meaning the person who works for the distributor, will say, hey, so-and-so is coming in town. I hope you can make it. It's tasting at this location. 4 or 5 hours, right? You get a window of time to show up. And I've definitely seen, especially recently in some of these smaller tastings, other folks there that are not in the wine industry, but that are my WSET students. And I think it's pretty smart for people to invite some students to come along and also for the students to go. Because having taught these classes for a while now, I've seen many a student who is now a wine buyer. I'll give you an example. Someone who was in my level 1 class a few years ago is now a wine buyer for the Emeralds Group. Okay, great. Because going to these trade tastings, it can be tremendously valuable for students as well. So here's what I want you to do before you go to one of these trade tastings. Take some time and research the event. Know what's being poured, who will be there, what regions will be represented, and kind of get a lay of the land before you go. So I'll never forget when I was younger, living in New York in my 20s, and I got invited to go to an Australian trade event in the Puck building. So my New Yorkers know the Puck building. I think they still do quite a few wine tasting events there. It's really beautiful. They've got all these like wraparound glass windows, high ceilings. It's a gorgeous space and it's a large space. So I went and I was like, I'm excited. I'm going to try some Australian wines. Well, I got out of the elevator and I was immediately overwhelmed. There was hundreds of producers there. It was packed full. And it wasn't just wine. It was like Australian product event. And so there were other things there as well. And I kid you not, there was like huge slabs of beef. And I just took one look at the situation and I got back in the elevator. I completely overwhelmed with the situation. So I don't want that to be you. Okay. So know what you are getting yourself into so you can plan and you can prioritize. It would be very difficult, if not impossible, for anyone to taste or visit all the things at that Australian event. You'd be exhausted And I don't think it would be overall terribly useful for you. So focus on what you want to taste and really make that your intention. If there's a certain regions that you are looking to taste, or certain styles, or specific producers that you want to meet. So know your goals. If you're a buyer for a restaurant, maybe you want to try the new vintages of some wines that are already on your list so you can decide if you're going to continue on with them, or even be able to recommend them, right? It's difficult to know all the wines on your list and have tasted them all. This might be a great chance to do that, but you need to be realistic about how much time you have to spend and focus in on what it is you really want to taste and who you want to meet. If you are a wine buyer, check in with your sales rep beforehand, because some of these wines that are being poured may be in stock, meaning in the warehouse. You could buy them and they'd be delivered the next day. Some of them are on their way. Maybe they're on a boat on the water. They're coming, but they may not be in the warehouse for another couple of weeks. And other wines, you may not get them unless you really ask for them. So they may be small production, highly allocated. And unless you say, I tried so-and-so wine and I'd love it, you may not get it. Know the stock situation before you go. But for me, the number one reason to go to these trade events, besides tasting some wines, is meeting the people. I've definitely met some of my wine heroes at some trade tastings. I met Ariana Okipinti once and tried not to fangirl too hard, but I don't know, I think I might have. But it really is an amazing opportunity. A lot of these winemakers, they run small operations. They're doing everything from answering the phone to getting on the horse and harvesting everything. And for them to leave their vineyard and come out to do one of these tastings is kind of a big deal. And they maybe only will do it once or twice a year. So this is your opportunity. If you know someone who you're interested in is going to be there, do your research beforehand. All the information that is available, you can read before. Look at the website, read the bio, maybe watch some videos. You can get some tech sheets on the wines. So when you go and you have this opportunity to meet the winemaker, you can ask really good questions. Like really good questions that, you're sitting around in your house drinking a wine and you really wish you had the answer to. Now, this is your opportunity. And by asking better questions, you're going to be able to develop a better relationship with this winemaker and learn a lot more about their wines and about them in general. And by getting to know some of these producers, this could be an opportunity for you, perhaps down the road, if you're looking for an internship or possibly a job, or if you're visiting the wine region and you would like to go and visit and you send a polite email asking if that's possible, well, then they have already met you at the trade show. So you have a little bit of familiarity already there. Makes it easier and makes it nicer for everybody. Okay, how should you show up? What do you bring? This one is a biggie. Even before COVID, I was not a fan of the shared spit bucket. I think I've mentioned this before in one of my previous podcast episodes, but it's worth mentioning again. I didn't grow up in a saloon. I don't know how to spit into a bucket from 5 feet away. I'm just not talented in that regard. I think that's okay. It is not guaranteed that you will get your own individual spit cup of these tastings, so bring your own. We live in New Orleans. Anyone in New Orleans has got a cupboard full of Mardi Gras cups. Bring your Mardi Gras cup, or just a little paper cup, something that you can dispose of or bring home and rinse out afterwards, but have it be your own. So then you can take it with you, you can walk around with it, and then when it gets a little full, then you can dump it out in the shared grossness spit bucket, right? Gives you a little bit more control over the process. There's nothing worse than talking to someone, especially one of your heroes, and then leaning over to spit into something. It's, like I said, some people have no problem and are actually really good at it. That's not me. So I have my spit cup handy. It's also a bit tricky because you're standing at most of these tastings, walking around, and you have your wine glass, you have your pen, then you have your paper to write on, and then possibly your spit cup. That's a lot. That's more than 2 hands can hold. Many of these tastings will provide a clipboard. They started doing that a few years ago. I think that's so smart because then you can at least clip your paper to it and stick your pen in it, and it makes things a little easier logistically to walk around and taste these notes. You often see people like in the corner or scurried away on a table because they're just trying to find any sort of real estate to put everything down and take a meaningful note. And, I did mention the spit cup, but I guess I have to mention once again that you do actually need to use it. If you don't, you're going to get to like wine 10 and your buzz will start coming and your notes will be just a bunch of hearts and X's and O's and, oh, I loved it. And that's not really so useful the next day. All right, so these tastings can go for a long time. You are not required to stay the whole time. That would probably be too much time, I think. So when are you going to go? I like to go to a trade tasting based upon what my ultimate goal is. If I really need to get in and out, taste some wines, have maybe a few good conversations, and make sure I get to taste everything that I want, I get there right when it starts. Because that way, it may be a little calmer, and wines do run out. And sometimes there'll be a special bottle, and the winemaker maybe only has one bottle. Maybe he or she brought it over, suitcase wine, and it's not available stateside, but they want to bring it and taste it. That may be gone towards the end of the day. So I would get there on the earlier part. If, however, you have a little more time and maybe want to do a little bit more connecting and also possibly see if you can tag along to the after party, because believe me, there's always an after party with wine trade tastings. And there's a lot of beer that's drank in the after party, but that's a whole other thing. Maybe you get there towards the end of the tasting, and that way you can still do your tasting. You may miss out on the special bottle. You've taken that risk. Still get to meet your wine heroes and ask them all the good questions and make your connections. And then maybe you all go out for dinner or a beer or something afterwards, right? That's not a guarantee, but more often than not, something that can happen and is really fun. And one more thing, just to mention, that these wine trade tastings, whether or not they're like a large thing that you've paid for that feels more like a party or a small, intimate dinner, treat them all with professionalism, okay? Winemakers work hard and their time is really precious. They're probably tired, right? They flew over from somewhere. They've been doing multiple trade tastings. So be respectful of their time and treat it as a professional event. All right, recap of what to do at a trade tasting. Plan ahead, know what you're expecting, know what your goals are, bring the things, bring your spit cup, be respectful, and finally, be organized. So figure out a way to organize those notes. I know now there's lots of interesting apps that you can upload your notes into. If you haven't already gotten a system like that going, you might want to look into it. Or I might want to do a whole podcast episode just about that. You're like, Joanne, you need to tell us. Okay, I'll do some research. How about that? Great. I do hope that was useful. And if you're like, well, Joanne, I'm not in the wine business. I don't get invited to these wine events. If you're in a WSET class, you've got classmates that are in the business. Mention it to them. Mention it to your study group. Say, hey, if there's a tasting coming up, if you think it would be appropriate, I would really like to come. If you would like to stay connected, the newsletter is the best way to do that. Go to wineeducate.com, and at the top, you'll see a button that says join the newsletter. It is my number one way that I can communicate with you about upcoming classes, and I will soon be posting our 2026 trips, and we're boosting up the trips for that summer. We're going to offer some new ones that I'd love for you to come on with us. Join us on a trip. All right, so that's wineeducate.com. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.